Who was very, very difficult to draw, and I knew I couldn't draw him. I kept on getting him wrong until the first TV debate, when I saw him moving. And I realised the way he moved his head, he was this weird combination of Private Pike out of Dad's Army and Pinocchio. What I'm trying to do is to create a visual metaphor about a news story, which will tease some deeper truth out of that news story. Also to have a kick at a few politicians, because that's always a laugh. And also, underlying all that is the purpose of visual satire, which is the purpose of satire in general, which is actually to cock a snook at the power, at the elite.
In Britain, we've been producing satirical art for centuries. Private Eye is celebrating 50 years in the business. So what makes all these visual gags so popular?
There's an art to mocking public figures, and few do it better than political cartoonists. One stroke of the pen can ruin a carefully crafted public image. But it's not all bad news. Sometimes a caricature can be the making of a politician.
Politicians' attitude to cartooning is very simple. If you're an unknown politician, you love to be cartooned because you will appear in the national press and people will recognise you. And they do like to be cartooned. But then the role of the cartoonist is not to turn out heroes. It's to puncture egos and to puncture reputations. And so they often don't like it.
My feeling about it is, and it's been noticed by other people about the way I work, is that whoever's there, you really go for. If the need arises. Well, the need does arise because you've got to produce a cartoon every day. But, no doubt at all, it doesn't matter who is in power, as I say. You are there to... It's a critical medium. It's not something... There's no such thing, really, sadly, as a positive cartoon.
Cartooning in Britain dates back to the Prince of the 18th century. Hogarth produced his social satires. This one is Beer Lane. And Gilray made fun of royalty and politicians alike.
The story here, the implication is that Marat made Napoleon the general to go into Italy as a reward for Napoleon taking Josephine off Marat's hands. Josephine was the mistress of Marat, and he'd got bored with him. It's totally libelous and totally wrong. Graphic satire is the only art form we've ever actually invented and created. And then it developed in the 18th century because there was no censorship. The other great thing, of course, is that if you laugh at your kings and queens, and George III was caricatured, and even George IV even worse, if you laugh at them, you don't cut off their heads.
Satirists didn't get far with Queen Victoria. She was just not that amusing. They concentrated on the politicians instead, and have found plenty of inspiration here ever since.
Cartoonists like Tabs. Churchill had the cigar, Maggie had the handbag.
Britain's first female Prime Minister proved a gift to political cartoonists.
Because what a cartoon does is to say vividly a story, whereas it may take 10 column inches to say it in writing. And so a cartoon has got to make an immediate impression, like that one behind you. You see, this is Maggie using a handbag on me, as it so happens. This illustrated my memoirs when I was Education Secretary, because we had the most fierce debates about the nature of education. She wanted a simple curriculum, I wanted a rounded curriculum. And anybody who attended those debates will tell you they were hard-fought debates. And she was very good at debating. She liked debating. And she had this sobriquet, the Iron Lady, very early on, in the late 1970s. And that reinforced her reputation. It strengthened her reputation. And she didn't really look at cartoons at all.
Since the general election, coalition politics has proved particularly inspiring. And while the coalition may be a novelty, some of the cartoonist themes have been distinctly old school.
I caught up with Peter Brooks of The Times at an exhibition of his recent work at his London dealers.
In the Rose Garden at number 10, the new politics was announced. And to me, there was nothing new about the country being, if you like, ruled by a couple of public school boys. But it's not a class thing that I'm interested in at all. I'm interested in the relationship between the two. I thought what I'd do is set a series of cartoons, or as many as I could make work, in what I called Westminster Academy, and have Cameron as head of house, Cammers head of house, and Clegg was his fag.
Can you be too cruel?
No such thing, no. I mean, I suppose I'm noted not for being as cruel as others, but I mock, and I'll laugh at them, and sometimes I feel, well, I hope it's the case, but I really do feel it. It's probably, to my mind, a lot more effective.
Martin Rowson creates editorial cartoons for The Guardian.
I am angry when I think up the cartoon. This government in particular makes me incredibly angry because I think they haven't thought any of it through. I think they're just sort of making it up as they go along and they don't really know what they're doing. And they're a coalition. But that's actually funny. The coalition bit makes it funny. There's always a temptation to depict people as monsters, and that's far less effective than depicting them as bloody fools. I could depict the current government in a very vicious, nasty way because, you know, the effect they're having on the most vulnerable in society, economic mismanagement. It's much more fun to actually be benign. So what I've done is I've continued to draw Cameron in the way I've always drawn him, which is as Little Lord Fauntleroy, because basically he is Little Lord Fauntleroy. But he's actually got smaller and more childlike since he's been Prime Minister. And he's surrounded by, and the government is made up of children and puppets.
Yet politicians seem to relish the attention.
Well, because I enjoy satire, it doesn't hurt me. You mustn't be hurt. If you are hurt, then the cartoonist has won. And you've got to be sufficiently confident in your own feelings, your own attitude to yourself and your reputation, that in fact things are unfair. There's a lot of unfairness in cartooning, but you mustn't be worried about it.
Lord Baker has been collecting cartoons for decades. This 1996 image by Peter Brooks depicts John Major and some of his ministers.
They were in real trouble, and one of the ministers, I don't know which one it was, must have said, "Steady as she goes." And so this is how Peter Brook sees steady as she goes. This is a government going over a waterfall into certain defeat and perdition. And that is what happened a year later.
Politicians love buying the pictures of themselves, don't they?
Some do more than others. Some do. Pardon?
You find they don't then? Or?
Yeah, I find they do, yeah. And I don't like it one little bit, really, because you feel you've failed, you know. And a politician wants what you've done. What's the point of...
In buying the cartoon, which is a kind of voodoo, damage at a distance with a sharp object, in buying the cartoon and hanging it up in a toilet, what they're doing is sort of Freudian and anthropological. They're actually taking control of the bad magic, possessing the artifact and hanging it in the place where they flush away all the filthy bodily fluids to get rid of the bad magic, to diffuse it.
Here at Private Eye, they've been making fun of the establishment for decades, 50 years in fact. And actually, this reconstruction of the editor's desk is part of an anniversary exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum.
They are the great patron of cartoonists in this country, and they really have kept this British strand of humour very much alive. And we were delighted to put the emphasis on that side of it. This isn't a show just about Private Eye as a magazine.
The show, which runs until January the 8th, features dozens of cartoons which have been published in Private Eye.
We get about 500 cartoons in a week, and the editor publishes about 25 to 30 of them. So it's a very, it's a cruel business in that there's an awful lot of rejection. So it took me about 3 years to get a joke into Private Eye, and you know, once it does, it sort of changes your life.
50 years. Are you part of the establishment now?
I think I've always been part of the establishment. I think those of us who went to minor public schools have been branded with that since birth, really. This is partly to harken back to our love of things like the Beano and the tradition of the sort of knockabout comedy of Dennis the Menace. Politics these days seems to be pretty puerile, and what better way to sort of reflect it than turn it into a Beano strip? Because Dave Cameron went to Eton, of course, which is not a minor public school, it lends itself to the sort of the Lord Snooty treatment.
Private Eye may be celebrating its first half century, but newspaper sales are in decline. So does that mean the future of political cartoons is disappearing?
You know, it's impossible to say, but I just have a feeling that the way we do things now, newspaper cartoonists, is pretty, you know, is heading for, you know, the knacker's yard, frankly. I just feel that. It's certainly already happened in the States. I mean, what with newspapers closing by, you know, the dozen, the cartoonists are obviously thrown out as well. And cartoons, although they may look brighter and more attractive in many ways when backlit on an iPad or, you know, a computer screen, they don't have the context that a newspaper cartoon has.
But others are more optimistic. John Link and Mick Bunnage publish their work online and in print.
We generally publish our own stuff. It's a lot quicker, and that's probably how Private Eye came around.
Yeah, I mean, Modern Toss is our sort of Private Eye, really. We decided to do it all ourselves.
All the too long.
We do our own censoring.
Yeah.
Put in whatever we like. And that's the way forward, I think. That's what most cartoonists should do.
No one took it seriously until we actually printed it on paper. That's, you know, anyone can put stuff up on here, isn't it? Don't know. It's probably different now.
Still got a big pull, hasn't it, paper?
Yeah.
Political cartoons began appearing in magazines in the Victorian era. Here's John Stuart Mill campaigning for votes for women, as seen by Punch magazine in 1867. But the newspaper editorial cartoon is a relatively recent invention. British papers only began publishing them in the early 20th century. This image of Cecil Rhodes from the Westminster Gazette dates from that era.
We've only been parasitising on the back of newspapers for 111 years. And I think that should print newspapers die, which I don't think they will, we will probably jump onto the back of the next host animal that passes by to parasitise on them. At the moment, it looks like that'll be the internet. The problem is finding an income stream, but that's a much, much wider problem. I could agonise about that, but, you know, I'm going to keep on drawing.